The phone rang at 4:47 in the morning, and Elliot Greer already knew it was bad news before he answered it. He had been lying awake in the dark for 2 hours, staring at the ceiling of his bedroom, the way a man stares at a wall when he has run out of thoughts worth thinking. The room was big, too big. The kind of room that echoes when you shift in bed, and the silence between those echoes is louder than the sounds themselves. He picked up the phone. The voice on the other end spoke for 40 seconds. By the end of the call, Elliot's life had been divided into two pieces, the part before that call and everything after. That was 4 years ago. He remembered very little of the accident itself. A wet road, a truck crossing the center line, the sound of glass. What he remembered most clearly was waking up in the hospital and being unable to feel his legs, and the doctor's face when she explained what that meant, and the way she looked slightly to the left of his eyes, instead of directly into them. He had noticed that. Even in that moment, he had noticed it. It was the kind of thing he had always noticed. The small human tells, the tiny moments of hesitation that told you more than words ever could. That skill had made him extraordinarily good at business for 30 years. In that hospital room, it only told him what the doctor was not quite willing to say directly. He would not walk again. The mansion sat on 11 acres outside Atlanta, Georgia. Elliot had bought it in 2009 when his real estate development company was at the height of its power. A 7-bedroom property with a stone exterior, a circular driveway lined with oak trees, and a staff of 4 people who kept everything running like a quiet, expensive clock. He had chosen it because it was impressive, because impressing people had mattered to him then. He had hosted dinners in the dining room for governors and investors and people whose names appeared in national newspapers. He had stood at the head of that long table and felt, with complete conviction, that he had earned every inch of what surrounded him. After the accident, the dining room table gathered dust for 8 months before his assistant finally suggested covering it. He covered all the mirrors in the house instead. He was not sure, even now, why he did that first. He told himself it was practical, wheelchair navigation, fewer things to worry about in tight spaces. But that was not true, and he knew it was not true. The truth was simpler and harder to say. He did not recognize the man in the mirrors anymore, and looking at a stranger's face in a familiar frame was worse than not looking at all. His wife, Donna, had stayed for 14 months after the accident. He would say, if pressed, that she had genuinely tried. She had attended every appointment, read everything the doctors gave her, rearranged her entire life around his new physical reality. But there is a particular kind of exhaustion that comes from loving someone who has stopped allowing themselves to be loved. And Donna reached the end of that road quietly, without drama, the way worn-out things finally stop. She moved into a hotel first, then an apartment in Buckhead. The divorce was filed, handled, and finalized with very little noise from either side. Their daughter, Claire, called on birthdays and holidays. Their son, Owen, sent brief text messages on occasions he seemed to track via a phone calendar. Elliot answered both with short, accurate replies that asked nothing and gave nothing. It was not coldness exactly. It was a kind of self-imposed quarantine. He had decided, at some point in that first year, that the people who loved him were better off not loving him too closely. He had made that decision quietly and without consulting anyone, the way he made all his decisions now. He had also, at some point in that first year, stopped smiling. Not deliberately. Not as a decision. It simply stopped happening. The muscles that produce a smile will only remain on call for so long before they accept that the call is not coming. His face settled into a particular resting expression. Not cruel, not bitter, simply still. His nurses and his cook and his groundskeeper worked around that stillness, the way you work around furniture you have learned not to bump into. The one exception to the stillness was Biscuit. Biscuit was a golden retriever who had turned 10 the previous October. Elliot had brought him home as a puppy 2 years before the accident, when the dog was small enough to sleep in the front pocket of a hoodie and confident enough to attempt it. He had named him Biscuit because his daughter had been visiting that weekend, and she was 7 years old at the time, and 7-year-olds name dogs what they name dogs, and Elliot had said yes without hesitating. Biscuit had grown into a dog of magnificent character, patient, loyal, entirely unburdened by the concept of personal space, and possessed of an opinion about every single thing that happened in every room he occupied. He expressed these opinions through a complex vocabulary of sighs, repositionings, tail movements, and a particular low sound in the back of his throat that meant, roughly, "I am not sure I agree with this development, but I will reserve judgment." He slept at the foot of Elliot's wheelchair every day. He followed the chair from room to room with the dedication of a shadow. He demanded nothing except proximity. He gave nothing in return for proximity, except more proximity, which turned out to be exactly enough. Elliot did not smile at Biscuit, but he spoke to him. Brief, low, conversational sentences that he never used with the humans in the house. "You left your ball in the hallway again," or "Stop looking at the window like that. There's nothing out there," or simply his name, said quietly in a voice that sounded like a slightly different version of the man Elliot used to be. The morning that something first began to shift inside Elliot Greer was a Tuesday in late February, when the light was thin and pale and the oak trees in the driveway were still bare. A man named Greg Holloway arrived at 10 o'clock with a leather briefcase and a firm handshake and an energy that announced itself 3 steps before he entered a room. Greg had been Elliot's partner on 2 commercial developments in 2012 and 2013. He was the kind of man who smiled with all his teeth and meant it approximately 60% of the time. Elliot had always known which 60% it was. Greg sat in the armchair across from Elliot's position by the window and explained a development opportunity in Savannah, Georgia. A mixed-use property on the waterfront, already permitted, already in the early stages. He needed a capital partner. He used the phrase, "You still have the instincts," twice within the first 5 minutes. He outlined projected returns with the practiced fluency of someone who had outlined them many times before. He leaned forward. He made steady eye contact. He wanted Elliot back in the world, or rather, he wanted Elliot's capital back in the world, and he had the decency to wrap that want in something resembling genuine concern. Elliot was listening, mostly. At some point during the presentation, Biscuit crossed the room in that slow, deliberate way he moved now. His joints had begun bothering him in the mornings, and cold days were harder than warm ones, and approached the low ottoman near the fireplace. It was not a tall ottoman, 6 inches off the ground, perhaps 8. Biscuit had been jumping onto it since he was 2 years old. It had been, for most of his life, the work of a single, effortless motion. He jumped. His front paws made it. His back legs did not quite follow through, and he slid back down to the floor. He stood still for a moment. Then he tried again. The same motion, a little more deliberate, a little more committed. He made it halfway, slid back again. He stood there for the 3rd time, this time longer, reassessing. Then he simply walked to the side of the ottoman, lowered himself to the floor beside it, rested his gray muzzle on the edge, and closed his eyes. He had done it without distress, without a sound. He had simply recognized a limit, accommodated it with the total absence of self-pity, and found the next available option. He lay there with his chin on the ottoman's edge and his eyes closed, as comfortable and unbothered as if this had always been the plan. Greg Holloway was still talking. Elliot was no longer listening. He was watching his old dog breathe, the rise and fall of the gray-gold chest, the small twitch of the nose, the way the tail, even in sleep, moved once, just once, as though keeping track of something pleasant. Something pressed against the inside of Elliot's chest. Not pain, not grief exactly, though it was built from the same materials. Something that had been stored under pressure for a long time and was making itself known now with very little warning. He sat with it and said nothing. He let Greg Holloway finish. He shook the man's hand at the door and said he would think about it, which they both understood to mean no, and he returned to his position by the window and sat looking out at the bare oak trees for a long time. That night, he did not take his prescribed sedative. He lay in the dark, awake, feeling the strangeness of being conscious in his own house at midnight, and thought about a dog who had tried 3 times to reach something just out of range and then simply rested his head on the edge of it and gone to sleep without a single moment of anger. He did not know what to do with that, but for the first time in 4 years, he felt something he had no immediate name for. It was not happiness. It was smaller than happiness, and more important. It was the faint, distant feeling that somewhere inside him, something was still running. He stared at the ceiling. Biscuit breathed at the foot of the bed. The night went on, and for reasons Elliot could not have explained to anyone, that was enough. The staffing agency called on a Monday morning in early March to inform Elliot that his housekeeper of 3 years, a quiet and efficient woman named Gloria, had taken emergency leave to care for a family member. They would send a replacement within 48 hours. Elliot said fine and hung up and did not think about it further. Staff came and staff went. He had learned not to attach too much to consistency. The replacement arrived on a Wednesday at 8 in the morning, which was earlier than Elliot expected, and slightly earlier than he was ready for. He had wheeled himself to the kitchen for coffee. He did this himself every morning, refusing to have it brought to him, one of the small daily insistences that had survived from his old life. And he turned from the counter to find a woman standing in the doorway removing her coat. She was not what he expected. He was not sure what he expected, exactly, but she was compact and direct in the way she moved, with a face that was clearly used to thinking practical thoughts quickly. She wore sneakers that had seen significant use. She carried a single worn tote bag over one shoulder. She hung her coat on the hook by the door, without looking for permission or guidance. The way someone hangs their coat in a place they have already decided is reasonable. "Good morning," she said. "I'm Carmen." "Elliot," he said, out of reflex. "I know," she said, and began looking through the cabinet under the sink for cleaning supplies. He watched her for a moment. She was not looking at him. She was inventorying what was there and what was missing, with the focused expression of someone who is already solving problems. He wheeled himself to the table, poured his coffee, and watched her pull out 2 bottles, check their labels, set one back, and make a small note on a folded piece of paper she took from her pocket. "You keep a list?" he said. "Always," she said, without looking up. "It's easier than trying to remember." He drank his coffee. She began to work. He went to his place by the window. She was good. He noticed this over the first few days with the reluctant acknowledgement of someone who has been around enough competent people to recognize competence when it doesn't perform itself. She did not move quickly for the sake of appearing busy, and she did not slow down when she thought no one was watching. She worked at one consistent pace from arrival to departure. She did not make noise for the sake of filling silence, and she did not treat silence as a problem to solve. She also talked to Biscuit. This was what Elliot noticed first, really noticed, on the 3rd day. He had been in the study when he heard her voice coming from the hallway, not the careful, slightly elevated, artificially cheerful voice that most people used when they spoke to animals, as though the animal were a child who needed encouragement. Carmen spoke to Biscuit in the same voice she spoke to everyone, flat, real, without theater. "You are in my way, old man," she said. "I'm going to need you to pick a side." A pause, the sound of Biscuit repositioning. "Thank you," she said. "That was very cooperative." Elliot sat in the study and said nothing, but he was listening. By the end of the first week, he had noticed something specific about the way she handled him. His nurses spoke to him in a register that was careful and supportive, in a way that had always made him feel like a problem being managed. His cook addressed him mostly through the cook, through what was left on trays, through knock and retreat, through the professional distance of someone who had decided that distance was the merciful option. Even Greg Holloway, with his 60% smile, had spoken to him with a faint undertone of adjustment, of recalibration, as if Elliot required a slightly different setting than other people. Carmen spoke to him the way one adult speaks to another adult, when neither of them has the time or the energy to be anything other than direct. "The hallway by the east bedroom needs a rug," she told him on Friday afternoon. "The floor is slippery, and the chair's wheels have a hard time with it. There's also a loose threshold strip on the bathroom door that's going to catch a wheel eventually. I can order both things if you give me a budget, or I can send you the links and you can decide." He looked at her. "No one's mentioned either of those things," he said. "No," she agreed. "The rug and the threshold strip?" He gave her a budget. She nodded and went back to work. He sat with the strange feeling of having been treated like a person capable of solving his own problems. On the following Tuesday, he was rude to her, not dramatically, not with heat. Elliot had never been a man who raised his voice, but he was short and dismissive, in a way that was clearly about something that had nothing to do with her. A call from his attorney that morning had dredged up a set of grievances about the divorce settlement that he had thought were behind him, and they were not behind him. and by noon he had a low, slow anger sitting in his chest like a stone. He snapped at her over a misplaced phone charger in a way that was entirely disproportionate, and that both of them knew was entirely disproportionate. She set down the cloth she was holding. She looked at him, not with offense, not with injury, with the calm, steady expression of someone who has encountered undeserved sharpness before and knows exactly what it is and what it is not. "I have 6 hours left in my shift," she said. "I'd like them to go decently for both of us. So if there's something that's actually bothering you, I'm listening, and if there isn't, the charger is on the side table in the study." A long pause. He did not answer. She picked up the cloth and continued working. He found the charger exactly where she said it was. He did not apologize. He thought about it. The words were there, available, not far below the surface. But something in him could not quite move them from available to spoken, and the moment passed. What happened instead was subtler, and in some ways more significant. The next morning, when she arrived, he said good morning first. He had not initiated a greeting with anyone in this house in longer than he could precisely remember. She said good morning back, already taking her coat off, already reaching for her notepad. What he did not know yet, what he had no way of knowing, watching her move through his house with that particular brand of unhurried efficiency, was what her mornings looked like before she arrived here. He did not know that she was up at 5:30 to get her sons, Marcus and Leo, fed and ready for school. He did not know about the second job, the grocery store 2 nights a week, the shift that started at 10 and ended at 2 in the morning, and left her with 4 hours of sleep on those nights before the alarm went off again at 5:30. He did not know about the notes in her tote bag that were not just cleaning supply lists, but also school calendar reminders and grocery lists, and a carefully maintained budget, written in pencil, in a small notebook, where every number had been entered and re-entered until it balanced. He did not know any of this, because she did not tell him. She came to work. She worked. She went home. The details of her life were not something she offered to employers because experience had taught her that employers do not need those details and frequently do not want them. But those details existed. They existed fully and continuously, running underneath every efficient hour she spent in his house, the way a river runs underneath a road without the road ever knowing it. Biscuit had taken to her completely by the end of the second week. He followed her path through the house now, with the same loyalty he showed Elliot. Not choosing exactly, but expanding. Elliot watched this without comment. The dog's instincts had always been sound, better than most people's in his experience. Biscuit did not like Greg Holloway. He had never liked Greg Holloway. Elliot had always quietly respected that. One afternoon in the third week, she found a tennis ball that had rolled under the radiator in the east hallway. Old, slightly flat, the felt worn down to almost nothing. She picked it up, looked at it, looked down at Biscuit, who had appeared at her knee with the expression of a dog who recognizes something important and is trying to remain calm about it. She bounced it once, gently, on the hardwood floor. Biscuit's whole body changed. Not a young dog's change, not the explosive, spring-loaded launch into motion that he would have made 5 years ago. A slower change, warmer. His tail moved in long, steady arcs. His eyes brightened. He took a step toward her, and then looked back at Elliot, almost checking, as if making sure this was permitted, as if he wanted a witness. She rolled the ball gently down the hallway. Biscuit walked after it at his careful pace, picked it up with enormous dignity, and carried it back. Set it at her feet, waited. She looked up and found Elliot watching from the end of the hall. Neither of them said anything. She rolled the ball again. Biscuit went after it. The afternoon light came through the hallway window and lay across the floor in long, pale strips, and for a moment, the house felt like a different house than the one Elliot had been living in. That evening, after she had gone, he sat by his window for a long time, not thinking, exactly. The thinking was quieter than usual, more like listening. Outside, the oak trees were beginning to show the earliest suggestion of buds. Not leaves yet, not even close. But the bare branches had a quality about them that was slightly less bare than they had been last week. You could only see it if you were looking for it. He was looking for it. He did not understand yet what was happening to him. He had no framework for it, no language that felt accurate. He only knew that the stone in his chest, the one that had been there in one form or another since that hospital room 4 years ago, felt, on this particular evening, the smallest fraction of a degree lighter. He looked at Biscuit, who was already asleep at his feet, the flat tennis ball tucked under one paw. He did not smile, but the muscles in his face did something they had not done in a very long time. They loosened, just slightly, as if remembering what they were for. The morning it happened started the way most mornings started now. Elliot awake before the alarm, the house quiet, the particular pale gray of early April light coming through the gap in the curtains. He went through the routine. Coffee, the window, the oak trees, which had real leaves now, small and new, and bright green in a way that felt almost aggressive after a long winter. Biscuit at his feet. Except that morning, Biscuit was not at his feet. Elliot noticed this slowly, the way you notice the absence of a sound you were so used to, that it stopped registering as a sound. He had wheeled himself to the kitchen, made his coffee, returned to the window, set the mug on the side table, and then realized, in the particular quiet of the room, that the breathing was missing. Biscuit's breathing was the baseline of every room Elliot occupied. It was the furniture of his days, the low, steady rhythm underneath everything else, so constant that he had long ago stopped consciously hearing it. Now the room was making a sound it had no business making. Nothing. He called out. The word came out lower and rougher than he intended. The way your voice sounds when something in you is trying to stay calm and is not entirely succeeding. Biscuit. Nothing. He wheeled to the doorway. The hallway was empty. He went left, toward the bedrooms. Empty. He checked the study, the dining room he never used, the guest bathroom. Each empty room accumulated in a way that started to feel less like a search and more like an accounting of everything that was not there. He found himself at the end of the east corridor, at the door of the sunroom. The sunroom was a room Elliot had not entered in over 2 years. It was small, glass-walled on 2 sides, filled with light even on overcast days because it faced south and east, and had been designed specifically to catch whatever light was available. Before the accident, Donna had used it for reading. After, it had become the kind of room that holds the memory of its previous use like a smell, not unpleasant, but present. He had been steering his chair away from it without fully acknowledging why. The door was ajar. Thin morning light came through the gap. He pushed it open. The first thing he saw was the folded blanket in the center of the room, an old cream-colored wool blanket that he did not immediately recognize, positioned on the floor in a square of early sunlight. Biscuit was curled on it. His breathing was visible from across the room, and it was slower than usual, slower and heavier, with a catch in it at the top of each inhale that Elliot had not heard before. The second thing he saw was Carmen. She was in the armchair in the corner, the old reading chair that Donna had always claimed was the best chair in the house, still angled toward the window where Donna had left it. Carmen was asleep. She was folded into the chair with her legs tucked under her, and her head resting against the wing of the chair back, her cleaning cloth still loosely held in one hand. Her tote bag was on the floor beside the chair. Her shoes were still on. She had come into this room to check on Biscuit. Elliot understood this immediately, the same way you understand the architecture of something without needing to study it. She had noticed something about the dog before Elliot had noticed it. She had brought the blanket. She had stayed. And she had been at the end of what her body could sustain, and her body had made the decision for her. Elliot sat in the doorway. He did not go in. He did not call out. He did not wake her. He sat with the image in front of him, a sleeping woman, in an old chair, and an old dog breathing slowly on a cream blanket in morning light, and the silence of a room that had been waiting a long time to be used for something good. Something happened to him in that doorway. He would not have been able to describe it accurately to anyone afterward. It was not dramatic. There was no moment of revelation, no sudden breaking open of something. It was more like watching a pressure release very slowly from something that has been pressurized for so long that you forgot it was under pressure. He sat there and he breathed, and he watched the two of them, one sleeping, one breathing slowly in the light. And he did not think about the accident or the divorce, or the mirrors covered in sheets, or the stone in his chest, or the 4 years of careful, managed distance from everything that might require him to feel something. He thought about the blanket. He could not identify it at first. Then he could. It was from the hall closet, the third shelf, a blanket that had been in the house since before he bought it. He did not know that Carmen had been checking on Biscuit during the day. He did not know she had been watching the dog closely enough to notice something before he did. He had not told her to do any of this. She had simply done it because the dog needed it, and she was there, and that was enough reason. He stayed in the doorway for 1 hour and 40 minutes. He knew because he checked his watch when he arrived, and again when Carmen startled awake. And the numbers were plainly there. 1 hour and 40 minutes in which he sat without moving, without checking his phone, without his thoughts traveling to any of their usual destinations. 1 hour and 40 minutes of simply being in a room where two other living things were also simply being. When Carmen woke, it happened the way waking happens when you have fallen asleep without meaning to. One moment under, the next moment surface, with a brief lag of disorientation before the situation assembles itself. He watched her eyes open, watched her look at the ceiling, watched the moment her situation assembled. She was on her feet before she had fully finished waking up. The cleaning cloth was in her hand. She was already talking, her voice rapid and embarrassed, and genuinely distressed, in a way that she was clearly trying to override with professional composure. "Mr. Greer, I am so sorry. I didn't mean to. I came in to check on him, and I sat down for just a moment and I never. This will not happen again. I promise you that. It was completely unprofessional, and I—" Elliot held up one hand. She stopped. The hand was steady. His face was the face it always was, still, not readable in the ordinary ways. But something in the room was different, and she felt it, even half awake, even in the middle of her own embarrassment. Something in the quality of the silence was different from the silence she had been learning to navigate in this house for the past several weeks. He lowered his hand. "He likes you," Elliot said. His voice was quiet, not soft exactly. It was not a soft voice by nature, but it was quieter than she had heard it, and it had something in it that she did not have a precise name for, something that was not distance. He turned the chair and wheeled back down the hallway. Carmen stood in the sunroom with the morning light coming through the glass behind her, and Biscuit breathing on the cream blanket at her feet, and she held the cleaning cloth in both hands, and she did not move for a moment. Then she reached down and touched the dog's ear, gently. "Okay, old man," she said, quietly. "All right." She did not know what had changed, but she knew something had. She straightened up. She got back to work. What she did not see, because she could not see down the length of the hallway from that room, was that Elliot had stopped at the far end of the corridor. He had stopped his chair and he was sitting there, not moving, facing the window at the end of the hall. The window that looked out over the east lawn, where the April morning was laying long gold light across the new grass, and the oak trees were full of small new leaves, moving in a slow and easy wind. His face was the face it had always been, still, arranged in its familiar, settled expression. But something moved in it, the smallest movement, the kind you would only catch if you were looking for it, and no one was looking because no one was there. It was not a smile, not yet, but the muscles that produce a smile, which had been standing down for 4 years, received something in that moment, some signal, some quiet instruction from somewhere below thought, and they leaned toward it. Just slightly, just barely, just enough. The day after the sunroom, Elliot asked Carmen a question. It was not the question she expected. She had arrived that morning with the particular braced quality of someone expecting a conversation they are not looking forward to. The professional, measured, we need to address yesterday kind of conversation that employers have with employees who have committed some form of workplace error. She had prepared her response on the bus ride over. She was ready. He said, "Where did you find that blanket?" She looked at him. "The hall closet," she said. "Third shelf. I hope that was okay." "It's fine," he said. "I didn't know it was there." He wheeled himself toward the window. The conversation apparently was over. Carmen went to work. But later that morning, as she was moving through the east corridor with a duster, she heard his voice come from the study. "Carmen?" She stopped and went to the doorway. "He tried to get to his water bowl this morning," Elliot said. He was looking out the window, not at her. He didn't finish the water. She waited. He was different last night. he continued. Slower. She had noticed it too. She had noticed it for more than a week, actually, but she had not known what it was her place to say, and to whom, and so she had watched and waited and made sure the blanket was always in the sunroom, and the water bowl was always full, and always within easy reach. I think he should see a vet, she said. A long pause. He saw one in November, Elliot said. I know. I think he should see one again. Another pause. He turned from the window and looked at her. She held the look without looking away, without softening it into something easier. She was not telling him something he did not already know. She was simply confirming that someone else had seen it too. I'll call, he said. He did, that afternoon. The appointment was scheduled for the following Thursday. What happened next, in those days between the sunroom and the vet appointment, was not dramatic. It was almost imperceptibly slow, the way the light changes in a room when clouds move across the sun. Everything is the same, and then everything is slightly different, and you could not point to the precise moment of transition. Elliot began asking Carmen questions. They were still small questions, practical on the surface. Where had Biscuit's old water dish gone, the deeper one he used to use? Whether she had noticed his sleep schedule changing, whether he seemed to be eating less in the evening specifically, or throughout the day. But the questions kept coming, and underneath the practical surface, they were doing something else. They were a man learning, slowly and carefully, how to speak to someone again. Carmen answered all of them the same way she answered everything, directly, without softening or inflating. She did not treat the questions as openings for deeper conversation. She answered them and returned to work. But she did not close off either. There was a quality to her availability that was different from politeness. It was the quality of someone who has very little time and is choosing to spend some of it on this, which made the choice mean something. In the second week of April, Elliot's son Owen called. This was unusual. Owen's calls were precisely scheduled. Birthdays, Christmas, the occasional significant news. A Tuesday afternoon call in April had no precedent. Elliot answered it with the usual wariness. Owen wanted to tell him that he had been thinking about coming down to Atlanta in May, just for a few days, nothing big. He had some vacation time. He thought. The pause here was longer than Owen intended, and both of them heard it. He had been thinking it had been a while. It has been a while, Elliot agreed. Another pause. Then Owen said, You sound different. Elliot thought about this. Do I? Yeah, Owen said. I don't know, maybe not. Maybe it's just... He stopped. Anyway, May works? A few days? May works, Elliot said. He sat with his phone for a moment after the call ended. Then he put it in his pocket and went to find Biscuit. The dog was in the sunroom. He had taken, in the last week, to spending more of his time in there, in the square of light, on the cream blanket that was now permanently established as his. Elliot wheeled to the doorway and looked at him. Biscuit raised his head, the tail moved. Owen's coming in May, Elliot said. Biscuit put his head back down. I know, Elliot said. Me too. The day of the vet appointment arrived cool and clear, one of those Atlanta spring days that is genuinely beautiful and knows it. Elliot's driver, a steady, unobtrusive man named Frank, had been with him for 3 years. Frank had taken him to every medical appointment, every attorney meeting, every necessary public event. He had done all of this without comment, without excess conversation, with the professional discretion that Elliot valued above most things. Frank had never, in 3 years, taken him to a vet. He brought the accessible van around and secured the chair in the back and drove without making it a moment, which was the right thing to do, and Elliot noted it. Biscuit traveled in the back beside him, lying on the cream blanket, which Elliot had brought without explaining why. The vet was a woman named Dr. Paula Hicks, who had a direct, unhurried manner, and who also, notably, did not speak to Elliot in the careful register that most medical professionals had adopted with him since the accident. She spoke to him the way Carmen spoke to him, as an adult who was capable of receiving information and deciding what to do with it. He registered this. He was collecting these people, he realized. People who had not been told to adjust their baseline, or who had been told and had ignored it. There were fewer of them than there should have been. Dr. Hicks examined Biscuit thoroughly and quietly. She asked Elliot questions about his appetite, his sleep, his activity level. When she had finished, she sat down on the low stool across from Elliot's chair and said what she had to say without delay. Biscuit had congestive heart failure, moderate stage. The heart was working harder than it should to do what hearts are supposed to do, and the body was compensating in the ways bodies compensate, and those compensations had their own limits. She explained the medication that would help manage it. She explained what to watch for. She explained what the progression typically looked like. She was kind in the way that competent people are kind. Not soft, but honest, and honest in a way that did not leave you wondering what she was not saying. "Is he comfortable?" Elliot said. "Right now, yes," she said. "The medication will help. He's an old boy, but he's a strong one. You can have a good amount of time left together." Elliot looked at Biscuit, who was sitting on the exam table with the expression of a dog who is enduring the indignity of the exam table because he understands that the humans require it. "Okay," Elliot said. They drove home. In the accessible van, Biscuit lay on his blanket and put his gray muzzle on Elliot's knee. Elliot put one hand on the dog's side, feeling the rise and fall, the steady work of a heart that was working harder than it should. They rode the rest of the way home in silence. Frank drove. The spring light came through the window, and the city moved past them, and nobody said anything. There was nothing that needed to be said. When they got back to the house, Carmen was still there. She was finishing the upstairs rooms. She came down when she heard them return, and she looked at Elliot, and then at Biscuit, and then back at Elliot, and he said, "Heart condition. They gave us medication. She says he's comfortable." Carmen looked at Biscuit, who looked back at her. "Okay," she said. "Do you want me to start a log for his meals and the medication schedule? It helps to have it in writing so nothing gets missed." He had not thought of this. "Yes," he said. "Do that." She went to the kitchen, found a notebook in the supply drawer, and began setting up the log. He watched her from the doorway, her handwriting, small and precise, the way she put the date at the top without being asked, the way she left blank lines in the right places so things could be added later. Something pushed against the inside of his chest again. Still not the stone. The stone had been changing its shape lately, was still heavy, but differently shaped, like something that has been in water for a long time and has begun to lose its sharpest edges. He went to his window. Biscuit went to the sunroom. Carmen finished the notebook and left it on the kitchen counter where he could find it. That evening, Elliot sat in the sunroom for the first time in 2 years. Not in the doorway, in the room. He had pulled himself through the door and positioned the chair near the window, not far from Biscuit on his blanket, and he sat with the last of the evening light coming through the glass in long, warm stripes across the floor. He did not read. He did not have his phone. He sat and listened to the dog breathe and watched the light change and did not think about anything specific, which was the closest he had come in 4 years to actual rest. When the light was gone and the room was dark, he reached over and touched the edge of the blanket. The wool was old and slightly rough, and smelled faintly of the hall closet where it had sat for years, wood and dust and the particular stillness of a thing that had been waiting patiently to be useful. "Third shelf," he said, to no one. Biscuit's ear moved. "I didn't know it was there either," Elliot said. He meant something more than the blanket by that. He was not sure he could have said exactly what, but Biscuit appeared to understand, because the tail moved once, a slow, certain arc, and then went still again. Elliot stayed until it was fully dark. Then he went to bed. He did not take the sedative. He had not taken it in 3 weeks. He slept. Carmen's younger son was named Leo, and he was 7 years old. And the main thing you needed to know about Leo was that the world had not yet informed him of any of its rules. He moved through it like someone who had received a personal exemption from all social constraints, not out of rudeness but out of a complete and genuine unawareness that the constraints existed. He had opinions about everything. He shared them continuously. He treated every new environment as a place that had been waiting specifically for him to arrive and explain what was wrong with it and how he would do it better. He was also, for reasons that had nothing to do with analysis and everything to do with whatever ingredient makes certain people immediately and universally lovable, very easy to be around. Carmen did not typically bring her sons to work. This was a rule she held firmly, one of the personal professional lines that she maintained, because it was the kind of line that, once crossed, changed the shape of everything. But it was a Saturday in early May, a day she technically did not work, and she had forgotten her house keys in the tote bag she'd left in the estate's supply room on Friday. And Marcus, her older son, was at a friend's house, and Leo was with her, because Leo was always with her on the days when he was not with someone else. She had planned to be in and out in 4 minutes. She had explained this to Leo on the way over. He had nodded in the way that 7-year-olds nod when they are agreeing with you in order to end the conversation, with no actual intention of upholding the agreement. Elliot had known Carmen was coming. She had texted Frank, who had relayed it. He could have left the side door unlocked and not been there at all. Instead, he was in the kitchen when they arrived, because he had been in the kitchen getting coffee and had not moved when he heard them come in, which was not a decision exactly but was also not an accident. Leo came through the door first, ahead of his mother, in the way of someone who has been told to wait and has interpreted this as a suggestion. He stopped in the kitchen doorway and examined the kitchen with the frank, comprehensive gaze of a 7-year-old performing an assessment. "This is a big kitchen," he said. "Yes," Elliot said. Leo considered him. Elliot considered Leo. There was a pause that in any other combination of people might have been uncomfortable. "What happened to your legs?" Leo said. "Leo," Carmen said, from directly behind him, her voice carrying that particular parental frequency that means we have discussed this. "It's okay," Elliot said, and then, because the child was looking at him with complete and open curiosity and no pity whatsoever, because there was in that look no performance of sensitivity and no careful adjustment, "I was in a car accident. My legs don't work anymore." Leo nodded. He was clearly processing this. Then, "Does the chair go fast?" "Not very," Elliot said. "Can I see?" "Leo," Carmen began. "It's all right," Elliot said. Something in his voice was different. Even he heard it. He moved the chair a few feet forward and then back. Leo watched this with the expression of an engineer evaluating a mechanism. "It's pretty quiet," Leo said approvingly. "It is," Elliot agreed. Carmen, behind her son, wore an expression that was simultaneously apologetic and watchful. She was reading the room the way she read all rooms, quickly, accurately, not saying so. She could see that Elliot was not managing this interaction. He was simply in it. This was a different thing. Leo had spotted the hallway. He looked down it the way a 7-year-old looks down a long hallway, which is with unmistakable intent. "Where does that go?" he said. "Various rooms," Elliot said. "What kind of rooms?" "Leo," Carmen said. "There's a sunroom at the end," Elliot said. "There's a dog in it." Leo turned to his mother with the expression of someone whose life has just arrived at its most important moment. "Mom." "I heard," she said. "Mom." "Go," she said, slowly. "Do not touch anything that isn't the dog." Leo was already gone. Carmen looked at Elliot. "I'm sorry. He doesn't really do slow." "I noticed," Elliot said. He picked up his coffee. He looked at the doorway Leo had disappeared through. "How old?" 7. "He turns 8 in June." "What's his name?" "Leo." She paused. "His brother is Marcus. He's 12. He's at a friend's house today." A small silence. Not the silence of the house that Elliot had been living in. Not the heavy, pressurized silence that had been his companion for 4 years. A different kind. Light, with air in it. "You want coffee?" he said. Carmen looked at him. "I'm not working today." "I know," he said. "Do you want coffee?" She studied him for a moment. Then she set her keys on the counter and said, "Yes, thank you." He made it. She did not offer to do it herself, which he noted and appreciated. She sat at the kitchen table. This was the first time she had sat in his house, in all the weeks she had been coming, and she looked out the kitchen window at the back lawn, where the May light was doing everything it could with what it had. "Does he always ask questions like that?" Elliot said, handing her the mug. "Every one of his waking hours," she said. "He's the most curious person I've ever met. He's also the most exhausting." "What does he want to be when he grows up?" She smiled. It was the first full smile he had seen from her, unhurried and genuine, with the particular warmth of someone talking about something they love without reservation. Last week it was a pilot. This week it's a marine biologist, because someone at school told him that dolphins can recognize themselves in mirrors. He set his own mug down. Something about the sentence moved through him in a way he did not expect. Mirrors. Smart kid, he said. He is, she said simply. Not with pride exactly, or not only with pride, with the particular certainty of a parent who knows what they have. From the end of the hall, they heard Leo's voice, not distressed. Not the voice of a child who has done something wrong or found something alarming. It was the voice of a child who has found exactly what he was looking for, and is now delivering a detailed report to the found thing. They couldn't make out the words. They didn't need to. Elliot wheeled himself to the kitchen doorway. Carmen followed with her mug. They could see down the length of the hall to the sunroom, where the door stood open, and where Leo was visible on the floor beside Biscuit's blanket, cross-legged, talking, explaining something, using his hands. Biscuit was awake. This was what Elliot saw first. That the dog was awake, and not just awake but raised up, his front legs straight, his head high, his ears fully forward. He had not sat that way in weeks. He had been resting more and more, sleeping in longer stretches, the medication keeping him comfortable but also keeping him quieter. But right now the dog was sitting up like a much younger version of himself, his whole attention aimed at Leo like a receiver aimed at a signal. His tail was moving. Not the slow, gentle arc of the recent weeks, a real movement, a living one, back and forth in full sweeps, as if something in the particular frequency of a 7-year-old, who had not been told the dog was unwell, had simply bypassed all of Biscuit's recent limitations and reached the part of him that was still young. Leo reached out and touched the dog's ear. Biscuit turned and licked Leo's face, thoroughly and without apology, and Leo wiped his face and kept talking without breaking stride, as if being licked by an aging dog in a sunroom was the most natural continuation of whatever he had been explaining. And then Elliot Greer laughed. It was not a polite sound. It was not the careful, controlled social response that he had occasionally produced in the last 4 years, in situations that required some acoustic approximation of normalcy. It was not managed at all. It came up from somewhere that had been sealed off, from a room inside him that had been locked for 4 years, and had not been unlocked, but had been very slowly, over weeks of cream blankets and tennis balls and direct questions and coffee made without being asked, worked loose from the inside, and it came out fully formed, genuine, surprised, as though even Elliot himself had not known it was waiting there. Carmen heard it. She was standing 2 steps behind him. She heard the sound and she went still. She did not look at him. She was looking at Leo and Biscuit at the end of the hall, but she heard it, and she knew what it was. And she knew what it meant for a man who had not made that sound in 4 years to make it now. She did not turn around. She did not say anything. She did not make it a moment by witnessing it in a way that would close it back up again. She moved past him, into the hallway, walking toward the kitchen to put her mug in the sink. Leo, 5 more minutes, she called down the hall. Then we need to go. Leo said something to Biscuit that neither of them caught. Biscuit's tail swept the air. Elliot sat in the doorway of his own hallway in his own house on a May morning, and he felt the last of something, the last of some particular and long-held tension, leave his face all at once, the way a long-held breath releases. The laugh had gone as quickly as it had come, but the place it had come from was open now. You could feel the difference, the way you feel the difference in a room when a window that has been painted shut is finally opened. Down the hall, Leo was telling Biscuit something about a fish. The dog's tail moved. The morning light lay across the sunroom floor. Carmen moved around the kitchen behind him, rinsing her mug, ordinary and unhurried. He stayed where he was for a while. He did not move because there was no need to move. For the first time in 4 years, the place he was happened to be exactly where he needed to be. Biscuit passed away 6 weeks later, on a Tuesday evening, in the sunroom, on the cream blanket. It was quiet. It was the way that real things end when they are not fighting, not with drama or noise, but with a kind of completion, a long breath that is the last one, and carries no struggle in it. Elliot was beside him. He had been there most of the afternoon, having noticed in the morning that something had shifted, and understanding, without being told, what the shift meant. Carmen was in the armchair. She had not been scheduled to work that day. She had come anyway. She had arrived at noon, without a text or a call, and she had knocked, which she never usually did, and Frank had let her in, and she had gone to the sunroom without stopping anywhere else in the house. She had taken the armchair. She had brought a book but had not opened it. The three of them, the man, the woman, the dog, had spent the afternoon in the room with the light changing around them, and nobody saying much. At some point near evening, the breathing stopped. Elliot had his hand on Biscuit's side, and he felt the stillness arrive, and he sat with it, and the room held it, and neither he nor Carmen said anything for a long time. When Carmen finally spoke, she said, "He was a good old man." "He was," Elliot said. A pause. "The best I've known," Elliot said. He kept his hand on the blanket long after the warmth had begun to leave. He was not ready to take it away. This seemed like an important thing to give himself permission to do, and he gave himself permission, and he sat there until the May evening had turned fully dark, and the room was lit only by the lamp in the corner. Then he took his hand away. He kept the blanket. He folded it himself, carefully, and placed it on the chair in the sunroom, and he left it there. The next morning, he called Claire. Not for her birthday. Not because an occasion required it. He called because the previous day had opened something in him that was still open, and he had the unfamiliar but not unpleasant feeling of not wanting to let it close. The call lasted 27 minutes, which was 24 minutes longer than their usual calls. He told her about Biscuit. She cried, which he had expected, and he let her, which was new. He did not move the conversation along to more manageable ground. He stayed in it with her. She said, "I remember when we named him. I was so little." "You were 7, he said. "You named him after his color." "I did," she said. "That's such a 7-year-old thing to do." "It was the right name," he said. They made plans for her to visit. Not vague, the way plans are vague when they are really just ways of ending a phone call. Actual plans, actual dates, something penciled in that both of them believed would happen. After the call, he sat for a while. Then he went to the east hallway and stood at the mirror at the end of it. He had not looked at himself in 4 years. The sheet that had covered this mirror was gone. Carmen had taken it down 3 weeks ago, matter-of-factly, without explanation, while he was at the other end of the house. He had known. He had said nothing. He had been waiting, in some quiet way, to be ready. He looked at himself now. The man in the mirror was older than the one he remembered. The face was lined in new ways, the hair grayer, the expression different from the one that used to look back at him. Less bright, but also somehow more settled, less constructed. He looked like someone who had been through something and had not come out the same, and had very slowly begun to accept the shape of the person he had come out as. He looked at himself for a long time. Then he went to the kitchen and made his coffee and took it to the window. The oak trees were full and green, heavy with their May leaves. The morning was clear, and the light was coming across the lawn in long, warm strips, and out by the tree line, a bird was doing something complicated and confident in the highest branches, and the circular driveway was quiet, and the house was still, but not the way it used to be still. It was still the way a room is, still after something important has happened in it, the kind of stillness that is not empty. Carmen arrived at 8, as she always did. She hung her coat. She took out her notepad. Then she came to the kitchen doorway and looked at him by the window, the way she had learned to look at him, directly, without adjustment, the way you look at something that is simply there and does not need to be handled. "Morning," she said. "Morning," he said. She went to work. The house moved around him, the sounds of it ordinary and real, and outside the oak trees held the light, and the bird went on with whatever it had been doing, and the morning continued in the way that mornings continue when you have finally, after a very long time, stopped arguing with them. The sunroom door was open. The cream blanket was folded on the chair, exactly where he had left it. Leo's drawing of a dog, which looked nothing like a dog, which looked more like a fire truck that had been enthusiastically repurposed, was still taped to the sunroom wall where Carmen had put it, on a morning when no one had asked her to, and she had not explained why. Because some things are done not because they are requested, but because the room needs them, and she had known this room needed something on its wall, something small and bright, and made by a hand that had no idea it was doing something important. Elliot finished his coffee. He set down the mug. He looked at the drawing from across the hall, the orange and red scrawl of it, the proud, messy, completely incorrect version of a dog that existed only in the imagination of a 7-year-old who had sat on the floor of a sunroom and talked to an old golden retriever about a fish, and had felt the animal's full attention on him, and had given his full attention back, and who had not known, and never would know, that the sound of his voice had opened something in a man he barely knew that 4 years of loss had sealed shut. Elliot looked at the drawing, and the corners of his mouth moved. Not a full smile, not yet, but something building toward one, patient, unhurried, the way the things that last are always built. He picked up his phone. He texted Owen, "May still works. Come whenever." Then he put the phone down and looked out the window at the morning, and there was no stone in his chest, or if there was, it was so worn smooth now by water and time and the quiet company of things that needed nothing from him but his presence, that it no longer felt like something lodged. It felt like a part of him, the kind of part that you learn, eventually, to carry without it carrying you. Outside, the bird in the oak tree kept on with its song. The morning kept on with its light. And Elliot Greer sat at his window and let both of them happen to him, which was the closest he had ever come, in 4 years, to being exactly who he used to be. Not the same man. Never the same man. But a man, again, with a face that knew what it was for,